Beaucoup de travail à faire.
Does Trudeau look a little too happy there for your own good or mine? I don't know. He looks very happy. We'll be right back with more about what's really going on with the Liberal convention. We need a political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Thank you so much for joining me today. It just never stops. The news cycle is just increasingly fast. And so what's going on with this Liberal convention, this leadership race? It's supposedly going to be all ready to go by March the 9th. And who's in the lead here? This is quite interesting here. 22 the front runner in this race is somebody called none of the above. It's got 22% support. That's much more than most of these. That's double what Justin Trudeau would have. Interesting that Justin Trudeau is still in the equation, isn't it? I find that very interesting. Chrystia Freeland is ahead with 19% over Mark Carney at 14. Melanie Joly's out. This is how, just yesterday she announced she's not running. And she says she's putting the Canadian interests first. She's putting Canada first. Well, we will see if that's really what Melanie Joly is doing. And I've got a bunch of slides that just disappeared here. I just want to make sure we've got them here. Now, who is Mark Carney? You tell me. This is the question that we really do need to answer. Who is Mark Carney? This is a guy who has clearly been doing a lot of things over the years. And there's a series of pictures that were taken, and I'm just trying to get this one up for you here. Having some trouble with my internet today. Wouldn't you know that? Wouldn't you know that? So anyway, guess who this is? This is Mark Carney and his wife, hobnobbing with Ghislaine Maxwell, basically who was pimping for Jeffrey Epstein. This is from 2013. They're at his wife's farm. She apparently has a large farm, a very wealthy family. This is Mark Carney's wife. And there's a lot of connections here. And so the Toronto Sun has run these pictures. I'm obviously not the first one. There has been some hesitancy to do that because this is a very, very serious. Now, is that you or your eco-warrior wife speaking, Mark? Mark Carney was already in trouble as the governor of the Bank of England. He was already way too woke for the people in the UK. And it's interesting, the connection here, his wife. Mark Carney's wife, Diana Fox Carney. She works with Jerry Butts and Evan Solomon. You remember Evan Solomon, the art dealer who was a CTV host at Eurasia Group? Eurasia Group is another globalist outfit that continues to get all kinds of support from the federal government in terms of contracts and consultants. These are the kind of people we are dealing with here. And so this is what the Toronto Sun has been reporting. I think this is extremely significant. And this is several photos from August 2013 show Carney socializing with Maxell. This is Ghislaine Maxell at an event called the Wilderness Festival. Carney had just moved to Britain to take up a new position as governor of the Bank of England after serving 5 years in the same role with the Bank of Canada. The published photos of Carney and Maxwell show he and his wife relaxing in casual conversation with the woman who would go on to become a well-known sex trafficker to the stars. They certainly can't be dismissed as just two people being caught in the same frame by a paparazzi photographer. The photos predate Maxwell being charged for her involvement in Epstein's sex crimes, but after Epstein's 13 months in prison over 2008 to 2009 for sexual offenses that Maxwell was not charged for. So these are here's these pictures again. What are we getting with Mark Carney? This is my question this morning. And I'm gradually getting into what did he mean in that thumbnail by Emergencies Act 2.0? Well, we're getting there. But what's happening to the Liberal leadership race? Let's just listen briefly to this.
Hello, is political analyst Laurie Turnbull. Laurie, thanks as always for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk quickly. Melanie Joly yesterday confirming she wasn't going to run. Is that a surprise? She said she thought she would have a good chance of winning.
Sure. It's a bit of a surprise. Yeah, I mean, I think she was certainly one of the names that people were really looking at, somebody who would have ran from Quebec. I think that's significant because now there's a lot of pressure to see whether Minister Champagne will put his name forward for this, because I think the party, I mean, obviously this is about choosing a leader. It's about getting somebody in there soon because there's going to be an election really soon. But it's also about growing the party, signing up members, kicking up some noise about the party's, change moment, right? Which they're trying to create here. And they have such an important base in Quebec. And so now with Joly out, I think there's a lot of looking around to see who is going to be this person from Quebec that the party will have running there.
Now, I believe they've had a kind of unofficial plan of alternating Quebec and outside of Quebec as a leader.
And of course, Anita Anand has just announced as well she's not running, transport minister. She was previously defense minister. This is somebody who probably was one of the more credible candidates, if you can stretch your vocabulary that far when talking about contenders for the Liberal Party leadership. Melanie Joly had very little credibility. So I think she was there simply because she's from Quebec, yes, and the Liberals love to ensure Quebec always comes first. But it's very interesting that she says she's fighting for the national interest now. This clearly, Melanie Joly probably didn't have a chance of winning. She was at 4% in that poll. But is this about a coronation for Mark Carney, who hasn't even announced yet that he's running?
Will that apply on this one?
I mean, honestly, I don't know about that. I think probably because of the nature of the speed of this thing and the urgency because of the timing of Trudeau's departure. I don't know if those, so I know exactly what you mean in terms of that back and forth, and that's typically what we see. I don't know if that would be a huge concern here. I think it's more even to have somebody running, even if they don't win, have somebody running from Quebec to go out and kind of show Quebec that the Liberals are still their party. kind of thing, because if the Liberals don't have somebody, like even in that leadership process, to be going out, selling memberships, campaigning, identifying, talking about Quebec and Quebec's place in Confederation, especially now, because we can see support for the Parti Québécois, for example, is going up. There's going to be push for, like, the sovereignty movement is gaining strength again. This, I don't think, is the time for the Liberals not to have a strong contender from Quebec, whether they win or not.
Now, it's like,
Are the Liberals performing in a vacuum here? Do they really think Canadians are watching and saying, wow, this is the party of change? Now we'll get back to this video in a second, but have a look at this Abacus poll. Have a look at this Abacus poll. This was taken after Justin Trudeau announced his decision to resign. He hasn't resigned yet. Let's make that clear. And I don't see any guarantee that he is going to resign, but let's take it for granted that he will get around to resigning if the Liberals choose a new leader. The Liberals are, what, 27% behind the Conservatives in this poll. Was taken after Justin Trudeau. It's not getting better for the Liberals. It's actually getting worse. The Conservatives gained 2 percentage points in this poll taken after Justin Trudeau decided he was going to resign. Now that's pretty serious. And it suggests to me that there's no real support for the Liberal Party brand anymore.
Carney, Chrystia Freeland come in. Who comes in as the front runner of those? Are those two to be considered the front runners, essentially?
I think so. I think that's certainly fair to say, and neither of them has officially said they're doing it. But the Globe and Mail is reporting this morning that they've each got 30, around 30 MPs at least supporting them, and so you can see, especially as LeBlanc and Joly have dropped out, that the caucus members are now moving around to choose whether they're supporting Freeland or Carney.
So here we are. Once again, this is Anita Anand is no longer in the equation. How about Christy Clark, who totally bombed by saying she's never joined the Conservative Party when she did join the Conservative Party to vote against Pierre Poilievre in the last leadership race there. And huge embarrassment. Somebody came up with a membership receipt, whether it was the Conservative Party, as the media is claiming, Jenny Byrne, the campaign manager for Pierre Poilievre's next election, or whether it was the Liberals. I don't know, because clearly they're out to get Christy Clark because she might have a chance of knocking off Carney. Although at 4% in the last poll, I doubt it very much. And now, of course, she looks like somebody who can't tell the truth. But the interesting thing is, neither of these two.
And I think,
Mark Carney,
they are the front runners. I think
Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, neither have even declared. And this is supposed to be the shortest leadership race in the history of the Liberal Party.
That has been anticipated for some time. And I think the more hours go by here that other MPs start to align themselves with one of those two candidates, it's going to be harder for other people to jump in and expect to find some support within caucus. So I would suspect in the next few days, people will be finalizing their decisions.
And with Christy Clark, with everything that went on yesterday, will she even still consider running?
That's a good question. I think, honestly, that the noise and the confusion and the apparent contradiction in the story here is far, far worse for her candidacy than if she had just said, yes, I voted, I jumped in, I took a Conservative membership because I wanted to help Jean Charest beat Pierre Poilievre. Whatever, move on. Like, I think that there was a way for her to bulldoze through that and get through it, and either it would have been an issue for people or not. But now that there's the back and forth and the sense that the lack of clarity, and again, like the apparent contradiction, I think undermines her candidacy significantly.
Could there be a surprise, like a dark horse, come up here in this race?
Oh, sure. And I think there's also a question about what's going to be the timeline here, right? There's still so much uncertainty about it. So once you get somebody in place, the election's going to be very shortly after that. How much furniture is going to be saved here? And is that person going to stay in this job for a long time? Or is the person that's going to be chosen on March 9th, are you the rebuild person or are you the short to medium term person?
I've got another scenario for you because all of these journalists, these pundits, are basing this on the assumption that the Liberal Party is gearing up for an election. What if there's not going to be an election? What if the House Parliament is prorogued for a second time, just as the new leader, and that could still be Justin Trudeau, by the way, just as the new leader is proclaimed. The House is prorogued again, and because everything is on reset, the Liberals could argue that there's no need to have an October election because it's a whole new world. And they could stay in indefinitely, or at least until next year. And what are they after? Well, what is Mark Carney all about? And once again, Mark Carney has not said he wants this.
To you, Mark.
These offsets can also be catalytic as part of helping the economics of absolutely essential breakthrough technologies that need to happen for us to ultimately get to net zero. And I'm sure that will come up more clearly because Bill Gates has led on those technologies.
Carbon Markets, a conversation with Bill Gates, Mark Carney, Annette Nazareth, and Bill Winters. My name is Nicole Schwab. I'm the co-director of the Platform to Accelerate Nature-Based Solutions at the World Economic Forum, and I will be your moderator for this session.
Where have we heard that Schwab name before? Mark Carney is a globalist, completely in the same pattern as Justin Trudeau and Bill Gates, for that matter. What's going on here? This is a climate change fanatic, a net zero fanatic, who is going to create even more hazards for the Canadian economy that is once again balanced on the edge of disaster. So that's what the Liberal Party wants us to get with Mark Carney. Now, to get back to Melanie Joly. Melanie Joly says she's going to stay on as Foreign Affairs Minister and fight for Canada. Yeah, everything is on the table. Joly won't rule out cutting off energy exports to the U.S. in face of Trump tariff threat. Melanie Joly is not in a position to cut off energy exports to the U.S. Energy under the Canadian Constitution is a provincial jurisdiction. She cannot unilaterally cut off Alberta oil and gas or BC gas or Saskatchewan gas, potash or whatever. These are natural resources that belong to the provinces. That's what Confederation was all about. Melanie Joly probably doesn't understand that. She's in no position to cut off any energy exports to the U.S. or anywhere else. But she thinks so. And that's why she's sticking around. What is Danielle Smith doing, by the way? Good for Danielle. She's at Mar-a-Lago with a couple of her allies there. And then you can, yeah. And good for Danielle Smith going down to Mar-a-Lago and doing what needs to be done to keep this going. With Jordan Peterson and Kevin O'Leary with her. I know some of you, Kevin O'Leary is very polarizing on this broadcast. Some of you love him, others hate him. But at least he's never boring any more than Jordan Peterson is. But good for Danielle Smith for going down, meeting with Donald Trump. She has already said Ottawa is not going to dictate if Alberta can or cannot sell energy to the United States. We do not need a trade war. Of course, Trudeau wants a trade war. I've said that often enough because it helps him. It helps the Liberal government to create a straw man in Donald Trump, to create an enemy. This is the enemy, and the Liberal Party will try to paint themselves as a bastion of Canadian nationalism fighting for Canada. And of course, it's all nonsense. You know it's all nonsense. You've heard this all before, haven't you? And So I'm going to get to the crux of what I've been trying to say here in terms of what's actually happening. Big news. You might recall I said if Trudeau prorogued Parliament, there would be pushback from Canadians. Yeah. And this is exactly what I talked about. This is Canada pushing back and saying, no way, you're not going to rule by decree. You're not going to prorogue and have your little leadership race come back again and probably prorogue again, keep us waiting for the rest of the year. No, we need an election now. It's amazing this is happening. Believe me, I'm not suggesting anything I said precipitated this, but I think I was at least right in my prognosis, excuse me, that this was entirely possible. Canadians were going to say no. So here we are in the anniversary of the Freedom Convoy. This is being labeled as Election Now protest and alternately as Convoy 2.0. Now, if we have a Convoy 2.0, is it possible to have an Emergencies Act 2.0? Because the government will exploit this protest as a reason to once again put down democratic action, to suppress any election, to ensure that the Liberal Party stays in power, regardless of whether it's Justin Trudeau at the helm. And he could say, look, I can't go right now because this is another emergency. There's mayhem on the streets, chaos on the streets, and we have to contain it. You can hear it right now. Why did Justin Trudeau look so chipper, so happy? What is he up to? What is he planning? Does Justin Trudeau ever do anything without an ulterior motive? No, clearly he does not. So my concern is that he could invoke the Emergencies Act again in response to this protest that's coming to Ottawa, and I will be on the scene reporting on January 22nd to 27th. This is big, big news. And we need to be aware of how this Trudeau government could respond to this. This is before, of course, the leadership vote. This is before a new Liberal leader is selected. Over a month before they say they will do it. In fact, it's a little over a week away. I find this absolutely fascinating, but I find this is an opportunity for the Liberals to once again come down hard on Canadians. And I think that's entirely possible. Now, people have asked me, is it possible for the Trudeau government to invoke the Emergencies Act without a vote in Parliament? Now, I will be asking, tomorrow I will be having James of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, James Manson, will be on the show tomorrow to discuss this with me. And I think that's one of the first questions I'm going to ask him. Is it possible, legally, for the Trudeau government to invoke the Emergencies Act without a vote in Parliament? You have to remember two things. The last time they had a vote in Parliament, but the Emergencies Act had already been proclaimed. Yeah, I was covering the news at the time for Human Events. I was writing stories on it. I remember that very specifically. And not only that, it was approved in Parliament after the NDP knuckled under to Liberal pressure to support the Emergencies Act. But it was never approved by the Senate. The vote was never taken in the Senate. And so it proceeded without parliamentary approval. It only had House of Commons approval, and they were already well underway by the time they took the vote. So it was like an afterthought. So could they do it again? You bet they could. And I'm going to ask this question tomorrow from a constitutional lawyer who probably has a better understanding of it than I do. But from what I experienced the last time, when this odious piece of legislation was invoked to crush peaceful protest in Ottawa, I wouldn't doubt that Trudeau would try it again. He will be prime minister on January 22nd, one way or the other. So is this possible? I think so. And I think this is what we need to worry about. And like I say, this is Canadians pushing back on the Trudeau government. But that's exactly what Trudeau wants. He wants Canadians to push back. So I think this is, here we have. No, I'm not getting, wanted to show you the picture again. Because we'll show you this again here. Sorry. Here we have the potential next leader of the Liberal Party. That would make him, if Mark Carney is elected as a leader of the Liberal Party, he's automatically the prime minister. He will be prime minister without a seat in the House of Commons. Yeah, it's happened before. You have to go back quite a ways. You have to go back all the way to John Turner, who, of course, was waiting in the wings all the time Pierre Trudeau was prime minister, waiting for his chance to come back. He ran for the leadership of the Liberal Party without even having a seat in the House of Commons. He got a seat in Vancouver Quadra, I think it was, after he became leader of the Liberal Party. But he was already prime minister. He just couldn't sit in the House of Commons. But he was prime minister. Mark Carney will be in the same position. So we will have an unelected prime minister without even a seat in the House of Commons. How can Canadians put up with that kind of tyranny? But that's precisely what we could have if Mark Carney is elected. And who's Mark Carney? This is a globalist supreme. You thought we had problems with foreign influence from China? Here's more of it. This guy knows everything about foreign influence and foreign interference. And that's what we're dealing with Mark Carney. But as I said, the real danger could be coming even sooner. If we have an election now protest that is exploited by this corrupt, inept, and invasive Liberal government that wants you to have no choice, that wants you to have no alternative. And that, my friend, is what I'm very, very concerned about. We have to keep our fingers on this. We have to watch this very, very closely because I'm concerned about the future of Canada right now. We are in very dangerous times. I can't overemphasize that right now. These are very dangerous times because there is literally no alternative to Justin Trudeau until we get an election. And the Liberals can keep playing their Prorogue games, their parliamentary procedure games for an extended period of time. And you watch, they'll do that because they think they have a divine right to govern. Justin Trudeau saw himself as the Sun King. He thought himself to have this divine right to rule. The Liberals have always viewed themselves as that. They're facing extinction in an election. Way down. And it doesn't matter who they put up top as their leader. But they're facing extinction in the next election. They want to avoid that next election with any opportunity they can utilize, including invoking the Emergencies Act again. You think it's impossible? Nothing is impossible with this government. And they don't care if Donald Trump is coming into office in just over a week, and it will impose a 25% tariff on Canada. And what's our response? We're going to jack up the price of bourbon. That will solve it. That'll show the Americans. Donald Trump knows that this is a big charade going on with this Liberal government. He has even less time for Mark Carney. He knows he's a globalist. He knows what Mark Carney is all about. We need a real government. We need an election now. Yeah, I'll show it again. Election now, not in October because they could avoid that. Not even in summer. Now. I encourage everybody to come out to these protests across the country. I'll have more information on this during the week, where you can go if you're not watching from Ottawa, and most of you aren't. I will have information in the description and we'll be presenting it on screen, but where you can go to protest, because we cannot live in fear about what this Trudeau government can do. We must push back and demand our democratic rights. That's what Canada was always about. That's what Canada needs to be about again. Almost 10 years of the Trudeau government has eviscerated a lot of those democratic rights and values. We need to take this country back while we still can. And by the way, have a look at our store. We got some great merch for you. And it's always a pleasure to be here. Have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of your weekend. I will be back tomorrow. As I said, we will be interviewing, God willing, James. I was going to say James Mason, not James Mason, the actor. James Manson of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And I think that's going to be a fascinating analysis. Can't wait to get to it. Back again tomorrow, folks. Thank you so much for watching today. Continue to resolve to resist, and we'll be back with all the news.